Hello and welcome to Jill Cameron Creations Christmas in July card series. We're talking about snowflakes today. I am using the Concord 9th Snowflake Turnabout and Snow Flurry stamp and die set. I'm going to use the stamp and die set first, and I'm using the largest image in non-traditional colors throughout all of this. I'm using grays, blues, teals, whites, silver. I know silver can be, but usually you don't really think of silver. You think more of gold and red and green as Christmas colors. I'm using these as winter colors. Sometimes you have friends that don't necessarily celebrate the same things or the same ways that you do, and I wanted to be able to show you ways that you can still celebrate them as a person and include them in your holiday season. And you can make winter themed cards to send to your friends that don't necessarily celebrate the same way that you do. So the first thing I did was I stamped the largest snowflake image on a piece of gray cardstock, and it's super light gray cardstock. And I'm using silver embossing powder, and then I'm going to use the coordinating die and cut them out. The background of this card is a slimline card, and it's 8.5 by 3.5. Yeah, 8.5 by 3.5, and it's dark navy blue cardstock. And I'm using that very non-traditional background there. And I'm using just these two stamp sets. I'm not using any other stamp sets for this. So all of the sentiments and everything are included in these two stamp sets. So you can get a ton of cards out of these two stamp sets. So you have the large stamp and the smaller stamps that are included in the Snow Flurry stamp set, and then the Turnabout stamp set, which you see up there in the top left hand corner. Of course, you can do a gazillion different backgrounds with that, and it has some smaller snowflakes in with it and some sentiments as well. Now the question becomes, how many more times can I say stamp set in this video, because I just said stamp set a whole lot. Okay. Big trick here when you are die cutting anything that you have already heat embossed is to put a piece of paper over it in between the die and the top plate. That just makes sure that your embossing is not going to be marred. There's a lot of pressure in there, and that heat embossing can actually get marred by other cuts from your cutting plate. Typically, to prevent that from happening, and I don't know if you notice it or not in my videos, I usually will I have my base plate. Of course, you don't cut on that, but then I have that cutting plate that is cut all to pieces, and my top plate not so much. I generally will keep my top plate, and I will rotate that out and throw away the one that's all cut up, and then I will have another cutting plate on the top that's perfectly clean. I like to keep that top plate perfectly clean for cutting with mirrored cardstock, cutting vellum. Other papers mar really easily, especially if it's a delicate paper. So that's one way that I keep them from being marred, and I don't have to necessarily use that spare piece of paper in there a lot, is to keep that top plate cut free. That definitely helps with keeping my papers nice and crisp. I taped these large snowflakes to the front of my cardstock panel, and I marked them where I wanted them to go off of the panel so that I could cut them down. I did not want to actually cut them with scissors at this point, just because I wanted to make sure that I had really crisp, straight edges on these, so that I would have right angles on them in the corners of anywhere that I needed to have them. If I used scissors, then I was probably going to have to go back and like trim some off and that kind of thing. When you're cutting little pieces off of it, the scissors are a great option, but when I'm going for these bigger pieces, I really wanted to be able to have clean cuts on the large pieces on here, but also on the littler pieces so that I could use them in all of the empty spaces that are on my card. This gives this particular stamp and die cut piece a completely different look than if it were just this big snowflake on the front of a card. Absolutely, completely different look. This is one way that you get more out of your stamps and dies. Hang things off the edge of your card panel. It gives a totally different awesome look to it. For the card base on this, I am just using white cardstock. Typically, I don't use dark cardstock for my card bases. because it gives them, you have to stick another card panel in there to be able to write on it, or you have to have like a white gel pen or something like that so you can write on the inside of it. And typically a lot of people don't have that. I do, but I give a lot of cards away and stuff, so all of my card bases are typically a light color. It might be a gray or something like that, but typically my card bases are going to be all light colored. So I am using acrylic blocks as well to hold things down so that I don't shift them out of place accidentally with my big old fat fingers. I am also still using Elmer's glue all at this point because I'm really liking it. I did it as just a test at a point where I didn't have access to be able to buy additional glue. You know, Nuvo Deluxe Liquid Adhesive has been my go-to for a long time now. But I'm really liking the Elmer's glue all. It's easy to replace locally. I can get it just about anywhere, and it's a really, really good price point for the amount of glue that you get. And I can put it in those little needle tip bottles, and it works perfectly. It doesn't bubble my paper either. I think if you are using any liquid adhesive and you're getting bubbling on your paper and it warps it any, you're using too much glue. You don't need a whole lot of glue to hold paper to paper. If you're gluing something down like a button, a piece of ribbon, you're going to need a little bit more glue. But if you're holding paper to paper, you really don't need a whole lot of liquid adhesive to be able to do that. So just keep that in mind when you are using liquid adhesives. I put a piece of foam tape on the back of this, the sentiment, which is stamped in dark navy ink as well. And of course, all of the products that I'm using are going to be linked down below in the description and over on my website. I decided it needed a little bit of something else to add a little bit more texture to it. I didn't want to put anything in the navy part of it. I still wanted to keep that background clean, but it just needed a touch more texture. So I am adding clear glossy accents in different places along the snowflakes. And just adding those in there really, really made all the difference in these snowflakes. And it's these little kinds of touches that make a card pop. It's not just the card itself or just the coloring. It's the little touches, the little finishing pieces that really help a card. I could have added a piece of darker gray or a different color or piece of vellum, or stamped the sentiment on vellum. That would have been a really good pop on the front of that as well. For the next card, we are going to keep this kind of simple but kind of not at the same time. I'm stamping and heat embossing the sentiment in the center of the card, and it's actually a little bit lower than center on the top to bottom of it, because your eye travels to the lower half of a design most of the time, so a little bit below center for the sentiment itself. And I'm stamping that in a dark teal colored ink, but I'm going to use satin pearl embossing powder on top of it. And that is actually going to give me this beautiful, beautiful light blue color that is absolutely gorgeous. Because that satin pearl embossing powder picks up the color that's underneath. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then I'm going to stamp a whole bunch of snowflakes around this. So cute. And absolutely beautiful. And notice how it lightened that color as well. You don't have to do that. You can. I was planning on embossing a whole bunch of the snowflakes on the front of this, and then I was like, nope, I just want them to be old plain color. And then I stamped very last over top of this, I stamped a few snowflakes and just put satin pearl with them, and that is absolutely gorgeous. I didn't really have a plan. I just stamped most all of the snowflakes off, the large ones off the paper, so that it looks more natural than if you stamped every single image on the confines of the paper. So keep that in mind when you're stamping randomly like this. It looks more natural, and it looks and feels more natural if you're stamping off of the paper, even little bits like I just did. So just stamp randomly. I used the same colors. I didn't deviate from my color there. I used the same color throughout the entire panel, and it's still really, really, really cute. Something that took less than 5 minutes to make, and you can mass produce these very easily because, oh yeah, you don't have to have a specific placement. You can just stamp away and be absolutely happy. I used the, it's a little cluster of teeny tiny little snowflakes to fill in some of the areas on here, and just absolutely went to town stamping on it. Then I trimmed this panel down and with a stitched rectangle frame and put this on the front of a card with a piece of foam on the back of it. Perfect little Christmas card, white card base, easily to mass produce, and just holiday cheer. Anybody could receive that card and absolutely love it. So I had a little ink where it wasn't supposed to be, so I used a mono or sand eraser on it, and that actually removes the ink without tearing up the paper. You don't even notice it's there. If you know it's there, then you know it's there just because you took it off, but nobody else will ever see it, ever, ever, ever. So here I'm just stamping over top with clear embossing ink, and I'm using that silver pearl embossing powder to add a little bit of texture to the top of the card, and I just wanted to add a little bit more shine to it, and that was it. I didn't want to use like glossy accents or Nuvo drops or anything like that. I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to add just a little bit more shine that matched that sentiment, and as you can see here, it's absolutely gorgeous. So there is the second card. This card is so stinking simple. Everybody can do it. It's a sentiment and 2 stamps. So what I did was I went ahead and I stamped the sentiment a little bit below center in clear embossing ink, and it says "Let It Snow." And then I added a little white embossing powder on it, and I'm going to do the same thing with the snowflake, the same little teeny tiny little dots. Kind of has a little bit of a shape to it around the corners of it, and that's it. I'm going to trim this down with that stitched rectangle frame, pop it up on the front of a card, and it's done. There's your card. Ta-da! Easy, super, super, super simple. That card right there, if you wanted to, of course, you could add a little bit more to it. You could add some sequins to it. You could add some dots to it. You could trim this down and put it on a piece of patterned paper if you wanted to. Absolutely gorgeous. But this is a super simple card that you can mass produce very easily and send a note to your friends in the wintertime there. The foam tape that I'm using is from scrapbook.com. It comes in a ton of different widths, different shapes, and that kind of thing. So from super skinny strips to, this is I think 3 inches wide. And I absolutely love it. It's on a great big huge roll. Great price point on it. Release paper is awesome. It cuts easily. I don't have to tear this. Just because it's such a big wide roll, tearing has gotten to the point where it's just not something I even think about anymore. But it does tear pretty easy as well if that's the kind of foam tape that you're looking for. And it's not very stiff. This is a little bit more flexible than, say, Scotch foam tape. It's not as stiff as that is. I really like it for my cards. It gives good support, but it still looks natural and it doesn't get bumpy and weird in places. I'm using the Turnabout stamp set. That is the Snowflakes Turnabout stamp set. I'm using 4 different colors of inks, and the jig that I have made for this is actually from the panel itself that came with the stamp set, because this was before Concord 9th was actually making the acetate jigs for this Turnabout stamp sets. If you have an older stamp set, you can probably go over to their website and get the jigs for it now. Or you can make your own, and their website shows you how to do that. You just find the center point of your stamped image and put a big cross in it, and then match the back panel of the paper and all that kind of stuff. They're simple to use once you get it done. You only have to do that one time. So I stamped all of the snowflakes in a bunch of different colors, and I'm going to stamp the sentiment that's actually included with that stamp set, and I'm going to do that on some Kraft cardstock and white embossing powder. So I made sure that you use your anti-static powder tool, and make sure that you use that liberally. A lot of people don't use black embossing powder for that reason. If you use your anti-static powder tool, black embossing powder just happens to show up more than white embossing powder does. So that's why it looks like it sticks to absolutely everything. There's no difference in it. Static electricity is static electricity, and things stick. Use the black embossing powder if you like it. It works the exact same way. Just use your anti-static tool thing, your powder bag thing. I am going to, my panel there that I'm using is 4x4 is the snowflake panel, and then I just trimmed the actual sentiment down, put a little piece of foam tape on the back of it, and then I'm going to mount this on a top folding note card of that same Kraft colored cardstock there. Added a couple of little Nuvo drops of glitter. I think it was Nuvo drops. Nope, it was Stickles. I used Stickles. Good old Stickles. And just added them to the center of some of the larger snowflakes there, just to add a little bit of shine. And that was it. It probably took me longer, honestly, to cut the paper than it did to make the rest of the card. It took no time at all to make this card. Super simple card, easy to mass produce to send to your friends. And for our last card, this one's a little bit different. I am going to go back to the large snowflake again, but I'm actually going to use this to wrap around a cardstock panel and put a sentiment in the middle of it. It's going to look a little different. It doesn't close, which is absolutely fine with me. It's because it's pretty and I really like it. It gives it some different dimension. Of course, you could do this way different if you wanted to. You could cut slits. You could make the snowflakes meet together in the middle a little bit more and cut slits in them to wrap them over each other so that they meet in the middle. Not a problem there. Absolutely not a problem. Just some different ideas for you to make winter themed cards for your friends. Look at that white embossing powder on that Kraft cardstock. Isn't that pretty? It's something that always surprises me is how white embossing powder looks on Kraft cardstock. It's so pretty. Okay, so now I'm gonna die cut this out just the same as I did the other one. And while I'm finishing up this card, don't forget to hit subscribe to the YouTube channel here so that you don't miss any cards. If you didn't get my email and wondering why I'm a little bit late on the July Christmas and July cards, my kitty Daisy got sick. I don't know that I really said anything about it. I know my people that follow me on Instagram and stuff knew about it, but I had to lay one of my kitties, Nina, my oldest one, to rest back in April, and then my Daisy kitty got sick and she stopped eating, and bless her heart, she stopped eating because she got constipated, and I didn't realize that was such a big deal for kitty cats, but evidently it is. And I ended up having to take her back and forth to the vet a couple of times for make sure that she had fluids and make sure that she could go to the bathroom and all that kind of stuff, and gave her a bunch of vitamins and all that good stuff. But she's eating now and doing much better and drinking tons and tons of water, so that situation has kind of passed, and this kitty mama is still worried about her baby, but she is doing much better. So that's kind of why I got a little late on this, because I was running back and forth to the vet with her and making sure that she was eating, and because she didn't feel good, the only thing she wanted to do was lay in my lap. And I don't know if you know this or not, but it's really, really hard to do video editing and voiceovers when you have a cat screaming at you. I know she joined me in a couple of videos and talking and that kind of thing, but she was very, very, very vocal there for a couple of days, and actually a couple weeks, and she really didn't want me doing anything but holding her. So I got really behind on doing some Christmas stuff that I wanted to get done for you guys, but unfortunately my kitty came first. So there we have it. That's why I'm a little bit behind on this, but I am gonna slowly catch up here and get everything done for Christmas and July cards. Probably not as many as I wanted to, but still gonna do that. Scrapbook.com is having a huge sale, so don't forget to head over there. I'll have some products linked to scrapbook.com, so you can go over there and check out their wonderful sales, because they're doing Christmas in July too. Woohoo! Different things on sale throughout the month. So definitely head over and check that out. I'm using a corner chomper, guys. I haven't used a corner chomper in a long time, but man, I love that thing. Okay, I forgot that I love that thing so much. So I'm going to finish up this card, and I'm just stamping the sentiment there in the center of it in some dark blue ink, and it really pops, really stands out. Absolutely adorable little card there. And if you have any questions or would like to leave me some love down below, go for that. And thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any videos, and head over to my blog and check out some more.